Hello, one and all. Welcome to this edition of Kitz Corner. I hope you're having a fantastic day so far. So, Bernie Sanders, geez Louise, Jesus Christ. If there isn't a bigger bag of disappointment, a complete slap in the face to everybody, he has reached new levels of serious disappointment. Bernie Sanders, the guy who revolutionized politics, got us to get into the streets, is our revolution. We need to do a rainbow coalition outside the Democratic Party, and everyone's on board. It got me excited for him. It got me actually excited to have hope in politics. And he got cheated in 2016, then he railed with Hillary Clinton, then he ran again in 2020. We all had hopes again, and guess what? He said Joe Biden was his best friend. So, I am thoroughly convinced. I am not like, the Young Turks or Breaking Points or any of them. I am solely convinced that Bernie Sanders is exactly who he is. He's a Democrat shill. He was a sheepdog to excite and electrify the people and think that's a grassroots movement, think that there's revolutionary measures coming, that there was going to be progressive politics, that something was actually going to change fundamentally, got us into the Democratic Party, and then just completely shit the bed. But this guy has reached absolute new lows. Disturbing. It's like if Bernie Sanders went back in time and killed his former self. Because now Bernie Sanders, not only is he a shill for the Democratic Party, he's not going to help with Medicare for all, he's not going to do anything with education, he's not going to do anything that he campaigned and promised on, as long as Joe Biden's okay with it. He's pretty much just a lapdog for it. But Bernie Sanders, now out in the open, is exposing himself to be a war pig. Now, that's not the Bernie Sanders I noticed and grew up and witnessed through his speeches, but now because, Joe Biden's a good friend of mine and I like to suck blue cocks of the Democratic Party, not the red ones because the Trump ones are bad, but the blue ones are just okay because anything Biden goes, Biden's my best friend. He's exposing to be an absolute war pig, and it is just downright disturbing. And he did this in an interview. This is from the BBC. On their nightly news program, and it is just absolutely disgusting and degrading to watch Bernie Sanders admit in the open that he is now lusting over the idea of going to war with Russia. Because, again, the Democrats, anything goes with the Democratic Party, but I'm going to stand tall and high when it's, Republican war, but, Obama getting a Peace Prize after killing millions of people, that's okay. It's okay. Because I think he deserves a chance. I gotta work on my Bernie impression, don't worry. But here's what he had to say, and this is just absolutely nuts.
Should America send F-16s?
It's not an issue that I've been heavily involved in, but I support what the president is doing. I think what Putin did was outrageous, not only for the people of the Ukraine and all the destruction, not only for the thousands and tens of thousands of Russian soldiers who have been dying. We need a world now, if we're going to combat climate change, if we're going to combat future pandemics, we need a world to come together. And Putin has radically disrupted that, and that is a real tragedy. But I think at the end of the day...
Yeah, Putin, out of all people, not the Democratic Party that, sidelined you twice and cheated you out of the election, not the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or the duopoly that I'm co-opting to, the one that's caused devastation, has caused more killings, has increased their military-industrial complex in the results of Russia invading Ukraine, because as we know, if you look at the history, Bernie, if you actually take 2 seconds out of your day to realize we were the ones that intervened first, we're the ones that are poking the bear, we're the ones that escalated the violence, and we manufactured this war, just like we did with Afghanistan, just like we did with Iraq, just like we did with Syria, just like we're doing with Yemen, just like we're still in part of Syria, the oil and natural resources part. But Bernie Sanders is he's like, oh, I'm not technically involved with it, but I agree with the president because Putin's bad. Putin's bad. I'm sure I got a great advice from the Democratic establishment that cheat me out of the election. Yeah, I sure as hell agree. Holy shit. Holy shit. Is this a big giant slap in the face? This should be the wake-up call to realize Bernie is a failure. Bernie's not going to change. There's no feel the burn anymore. He pissed it right off. He had pissed on the burn, and now it's completely gone. He is now a complete corporate Democrat stooge who could say the right words and get you electrified, but in the end, nothing's going to come of it. Nothing's going to change. But I'm going to sound like I'm pushing Joe Biden to the left because I think we can make progress. I think he's a good guy. Even though he's a warmonger, he's a really good guy. Let's hear this again, because this is just absolutely insane.
Should America send F-16s?
It's not an issue that I've been heavily involved in, but I support what the president is doing. I think what Putin did was outrageous, not only for the people of...
So, what about the United States intervening in Ukraine and overthrowing the democratically elected government? Is that outrageous? Is that outrageous? Because we've done that multiple times over in other countries. We've done that so many times, we've lost count of how many countries we intervened, overthrew the democratically elected government, installed a dictator, and then military intervened and hijacked their resources and letting the people in villages die and pillage. But of course, he's going to side with the Democratic base. He's going to side with the Democratic base because it's safe for him. It's a safe space. He's not going to rock the boat. And considering Bernie has already met his match, considering Bernie has had so much of the Democratic Party shit in his face, the fact that he was called a Russian, part of a Russian ploy, he's been Russiagated multiple times. The fact that he got cheated out of his own election twice, not said a word about this. But now he's going to full-on engage in war tactics and the pushing of the possibility of nuclear war. Even to the point where he shoved Nick Braun out of the way. Well, who are you working for? He worked for you, Bernie. He worked for you. He campaigned for you because he thought he was going to... You thought he was going to bring a revolution. And you completely failed him and the people. And now you're just a disgusting, duopoly, war pig, psychopath, narcissistic piece of shit. You're no different than Joe Biden. You're no different than Mitch McConnell. You're no different than any of them. And it's the same with the fraud squad. It's the same. Any road through the Democratic Party, if you're a progressive or you have good intentions, is going to lead to a graveyard. You're not going to get an anti-war voice in the Democratic Party. You're not going to get an anti-war voice in the Republican Party. The only anti-war voices out there are coming from us. Because we're the ones that have to sacrifice. We're the ones that have to deal with the disaster. Bernie's not going to be fighting the war. Mitch McConnell's not going to be fighting a war. Nancy Pelosi's not going to be fighting a war. Joe Biden's not fighting a war. Kamala Harris is not fighting for it. So, of course, they're going to be outraged and say, we need to go into battle because Putin is so awful. Meanwhile, the most ecological disaster just happened recently in East Palestine, Ohio. Does Bernie mention that? No. Does he mention about the millions of homeless people that's now causing this outright chaos and the crisis has built because he sent so much money to this most corrupted nation, East Europe? Nope. But he's gonna wag the finger and say it on BBC News because he's not gonna say it on American television because, I don't know, maybe Kyle Kalinske and Crystal Ball will lose spirit over him. God forbid. You know, because he loves the progressives so much, but I'm not going to let that Kyle interview me. What an absolute disgrace.
Of the Ukraine and all the destruction, not only for the thousands and tens of thousands of Russian soldiers who have been dying. We need a world now, if we're going to combat climate change, if we're going to combat future pandemics, we need a world to come together. And Putin has radically disrupted that, and that is a real tragedy. But I think at the end of the day, the United States, NATO cannot sit back and allow Putin's aggression to go unresponded.
So there you go. Bernie Sanders beating the war drums. Harsh. Beating the war drums to the point of sounding like the Republicans that he's supposed to be against. And Bernie Sanders revealing himself every step of the way. Because that wasn't the Bernie Sanders I knew at one point that got me electrified and intense and actually got me thinking about progressive politics, because at one point Bernie Sanders was the voice of anti-war. And here's what he said during the 2020 debate on CNN here.
I think my record speaks to that, Wolf. In 2002, when the Congress was debating whether or not we go into a war in Iraq, invade Iraq, I got up on the floor of the House and I said that would be a disaster. It would lead to unprecedented levels of chaos in the region. And I not only voted against the war, I helped lead the effort against that war. Just last year, I helped, for the first time in the modern history of this country, pass a War Powers Act resolution working with a conservative Republican, Mike Lee of Utah, which said that the war in Yemen, led by Saudi Arabia, was unconstitutional because Congress had not authorized it. We got a majority.
So why is he not saying this in the BBC interview? It's unconstitutional. Did anyone vote for an invasion? Did anyone vote to send military arms to Ukraine? Or was it just an executive order by the military-industrial complex, Bernie, that you once called out multiple times in debate stages and campaigns, which is why people endorsed you, and now, because you got a cushy job with Joe Biden, you decide to show your true colors. That you're a Democratic war hog. You're a piece of garbage politician, Bernie. You're a slap in the face. You're an utter disappointment. And I can't believe that people still, I see it all the time on the YouTubes, all the other podcasters still think that somehow you're going to turn things around. Because you've been cheated out twice. You haven't called that out. You haven't called out the system since you got that cushy job with Joe Biden. You called Joe Biden your best friend and pushing his agenda, and then going on Twitter and blaming everything on Republicans, even though you know single-handedly that the Democratic Party is against you, Bernie. You know that from the start, and you haven't said a goddamn word. You cowardly cuck. And the fact that you could say this on a debate stage and get people riled up because we thought maybe there was a chance for peace in the Democratic Party, considering that the last two administrations were war pigs, considering that almost the entire American political structure is nothing but war and bloodshed. We have a death economy. We go and kill others for dead bodies to make money. And we thought somewhere out there was going to be a peace advocate. Maybe it was Bernie Sanders. Maybe it was Tulsi Gabbard. At least Tulsi Gabbard learned better. I got disappointed when Tulsi Gabbard endorsed Joe Biden, and I still have mixed emotions on that. But at least Tulsi Gabbard learned better. Tulsi Gabbard got out of politics, got out of the duopoly. She went to the Rage Against the War Machine rally, Bernie. She didn't go on BBC and say, Putin's a bad guy, because I got told by insiders to say it.
Vote in the Senate. We got a majority vote in the House. Unfortunately, Bush vetoed that, and that horrific war continues. I am able to work with Republicans. I am able to bring people together to try to create a world.
So why aren't you not speaking that now? Why aren't you not coming up with an idea? Hey, I'm going to work with somebody, maybe even with the Republicans, to stop the mass amounts of arms training to a bunch of neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Maybe we should stop the flow of illegal weapons to another country, to a corrupt nation, and adding fuel to this fire. Maybe we should look at conflict resolution. Maybe we need to examine what's happening in the situation and find a resolve, find a way to end this war and deal with domestic policies that you're more familiar with. Which, by the way, he's not done a single thing. He has not done a single thing. He sided with the biggest transfer of wealth during the COVID lockdowns. He's not giving you Medicare for all. He's not giving you tuition-free college. He's not there to give you $15 minimum wage. He's against the workers now. He couldn't care less about you. And I thought maybe there's some hope that he'd be anti-war. But it turns out, yeah, I was right. That this guy is completely full of shit. And this is Jack Hunter. And he says, Bernie Sanders agrees with Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and Mitch McConnell that the U.S. should fund the Ukraine war for as long as it takes. Code Pink, Noam Chomsky, Ralph Nader, Ron Paul, Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, and others want to end the U.S. proxy war. You mean that the same kind of style and proxy war that he campaigned against with Iraq and Afghanistan? You just heard it there. I voted against the Iraq war, but now because it's a blue war, it's the Democrats in charge. Well, I got to consider that. So I leave with this. The anti-war left. Where are you? Where the frig are you? Because at least there's some people, some sane people, by the thousands that showed up at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. And I'm sure there's many people, including myself, here on this channel that don't want a nuclear catastrophe, don't want to engage in more wars. We have spent trillions and trillions of dollars and millions of people have died across the world. When we engage in proxy wars, when we engage in these manufactured destructions, and it doesn't benefit anybody, nobody wants war to happen. Nobody wants war to happen until the propaganda drops. Then people get manipulated. Then they get sidestepped. Then they think they're actually doing humanitarianism. As H.G. Wells, in his famous quote, you have to stop the war before the war gets you. And that's what so many people are trying to do. And it is just absolutely amazing, the propaganda and the lies and the manipulation, the fact that Bernie Sanders is just outright a war pig. Just revealing his true colors on BBC, just announcing that, yeah, I agree with the president that Putin's a bad guy, so we got to spend billions and billions of dollars, $100 billion to fund another country's military. You do realize $100 billion, Bernie, could give us Medicare for all, could end homelessness, can provide quality education to every single individual in the United States. $100 billion on top of already the bloated military budget that we spend all around the world. That could have easily got us Medicare for all. That could have easily fixed the transportation system so we wouldn't have to deal with another East Palestine, Ohio situation again. But Bernie doesn't care. Bernie's got a cushy job now. He's now the Secretary of Health or Pharmaceuticals, which, God forsaken Jesus, that is a complete joke. Bernie Sanders, who used to rail against the Big Pharma, is now siding with Big Pharma. He's a complete and utter useless fraud, ladies and gentlemen. And this is just to remind people the crystal balls and the Kyle Kalinskis out there and the TYTs and the Sam Cedars out there. You still kissing up to the tree of Bernie Sanders and AOC thinking that things are going to change. You definitely need a wake-up call. And that wake-up call was when Bernie Sanders decided to say Joe Biden is a friend of mine. Because clearly he was not going to challenge him. Clearly he was not going to challenge the party that cheated him twice in the election. Clearly he revealed his true colors, that he is a complete simp for the Democratic Party. I hope I'm using that word correctly. Simp? I'm using the Reddit vocabulary right now. But that's what he is. A complete, utter disaster. And I wish there was more people like this. I wish there was more anti-war people like yesteryears. Because before Barack Obama got a Peace Prize on top of his kill list, people were sick and tired of the wars. People stood up against the machine. Like, where's the Woodstock generation? Where's the people that, rallied against the Bush wars? But now it's okay because it's a blue war. It's a blue war. It's better than the red wars. The red wars are terrible, but the blue wars are going to be more democratic. Just an utter disgrace.